So my journey to Appledore Island began on a boat named Blackie, owned by my grandfather. Like many Queens families, his had a second house, a summer cottage actually, and a boat on the North Fork of Long Island. My siblings and I spent many fun weekends seining, swimming, wading in tidal streams, and having young blowfish nibble at our toes. Like many growing up in the 1960s, I loved watching Jacques Cousteau on the TV, and so wanted to be a marine biologist. So of course, while at Cornell, I had to take the Shoals Marine Lab course. My friend Barb said I was the one who convinced everyone the women should stay in the tent. This was in 1975. I'm the one in the suede hat in the top row. From afar, it doesn't look too bad, but it's co-located with red ants, so we had to put all the bedposts in cups of water and keep everything off the floor. It's no mean feat when all you have is a chair and a dresser drawer or two for your stuff. I've been a reporter now at Science for 20 years. I got into science journalism for love. Love of a graduate student who did his PhD work in Kansas, and the closest I could come to an ocean was a salty freshwater pond of marsh, actually, near Lawrence, Kansas. Turned out to be a good idea, though. I really like the instant gratification of a story in print, and it suits me much better than a long, torturous journey to scientific discovery. As a reporter, I've had a ringside seat to several game-changing advances. Tech folks like to use the term disruptive technologies, and that's what Nature called an advance that I actually had a scoop on. The gene editing star CRISPR, but more on that later. Indeed, when I first started at Science, my primary job was covering the Human Genome Project. I mean, talk about a disruptive technology. Again, more on that later. My experience at Shoals gave me my first grounding in what it was really like to do science, about the limitations you had to deal with, like an entire island shrouded in poison ivy, which I was terrified of. It made me realize that a lot of research was minutia, counting every single small amphipod and every stalk of seaweed, even though the sun was hot, of measuring and remeasuring your transects to make sure they were actually placed correctly. I learned how animals adapt to their environment in many different and sometimes unusual ways. Actually, sometimes ways that, well, frankly, seem pretty icky. The field work was not always pleasant. In my day, we weren't smart enough to bring our bike helmets. And just thinking about it today, I think in my day we didn't have bike helmets. But the Shoals Marine Lab was put a lot of people on the path to research. For me and some of my friends who went there, the experience was really disrupted in a much more personal way. I went from a Long Island suburban girl to a nature lover. What? No mirrors? No water for showers? I let go of a lot of conventional values about what are acceptable living conditions, and I've hence enjoyed many outdoor living, outdoor hiking, biking, and kayak adventures ever since. Here I am in Patagonia, in Chile. This is Sunny J. Bernstadt in the flannel shirt, third in the top row, third from the left, and doing what she loves most, kayaking. She had wanted to study whales, and then she went to a whale symposium where the speaker pointed out that there were not enough whales to go around for all the students in the audience. So the ocean became her passion, and Shoals helped cement her love of the sea and taught her about the fragility of the ocean, of the oceans. In fact, yesterday we were talking about what we got out of the transect studies, and to her, it was understanding pollution. And Ian Hayes, who went to the Shoals thinking he would become a wildlife biologist, he wrote to me, "The Marine Lab is a perfect place to experience biology as it actually exists in the world, rather than as it appears in textbooks. The entire experience made me realize that one way or another, the ocean and New England had to be a major part of my life. Once in Boston, though, he opted for a much more lucrative career in computers. He founded his own company, is now retired. But Shoals helped him in that line of work as well. He writes, "The Shoals Marine Lab provided intimate knowledge of the scientific method in a real-world environment. I cannot overstate how much that foundation enabled me to understand and solve complex problems in many types of business environments. The concepts of ecosystems and interdependencies apply just as strongly in the business world as they do in nature." And the whole experience served him well during his 6 years volunteering on Beverly, Massachusetts Conservation Commission. I can't leave out the influence of the faculty I met here. Apologies. They were nuts, leaping over rocks and challenging us to do the same. Bottomless wells of knowledge about seaweeds, about birds, about fish, about lobsters. Though of course you had to learn about lobsters before you could eat them. So when I was asked to think about Shoals 50 years from now, that was our charge actually, I couldn't imagine, at first I couldn't imagine that it should or could be any different. Then I did some research and found out how marine labs are struggling to stay afloat. That's this report that was mentioned earlier. And how the Gulf of Maine is one of the most rapidly warming bodies of water. And I panicked. I envisioned ruins overrun by poison ivy, the porches of dilapidated buildings now hosting gull nests. Actually, it was quite sad for a day or two. But then I thought, okay, just as Appledore has hosted many lives, it too has had many lives. Here it is, a fancy resort where a whole different group of people made their mark on this rocky outcrop, inspiring artists and horticulturists alike. Even just from my time there to now, Appledore has come a long way. Oops, okay. It's changed in some ways, but not in others, and I think it can continue to do so in a way to position itself well for the future. I think the Shoals Marine Lab can broaden its student base, make research and monitoring efforts more relevant, build stronger ties with UNH and Cornell departments, and integrate itself in the fabric of marine and coastal research. Here are some of my naive, but hopefully not too disruptive ideas. First, more students. Already a new kind of student has started to inhabit the island, engineering students who learn about sustainability and help Appledore achieve it. The list of sustainable measures is quite extensive. Even the toilets are foam flush to conserve water. The lab has done so much, and I think more can be made of this uniqueness. More than ever before, students need to experience this kind of green living, taste it, bathe in it, embrace it as a way of life for themselves and for the companies and the families they build. It's not an education needed solely by environmental science and marine policy students. I think it should be required of everyone, just as freshman writing is. More research. Julie Ellis is an example of how research can thrive at Shoals and bolster its main mission of education. I'm most fascinated by her gull tagging project. Begun in 2004, I think there's like 4,000 birds tagged already. With a website for recitings, it's amassing much information about these birds. Take this one. Obviously this is not Maine, but would you consider that this gull wound up in Florida? Some go no farther than the local garbage dump, but a few head all the way to Texas. Consider too the value of transect studies. Done carefully and in a standardized way, they are leading to an extensive data set for identifying who is there, who is not there, and how their numbers are changing. I'm very impressed to see there's a regular subtitle survey as well. These surveys are documenting the arrival of invasives, for example. And remember, it's grassroots monitoring efforts like this that helped convince the world decades ago about the plight of the coral reefs. And the power and impact of these efforts should and could be enhanced by pooling these data with similar data sets. Turn this slide sideways and it looks like Appledore Island, but this is Tatoosh Island off the coast of Washington. For decades, biologists have been studying this island, perhaps even more than Appledore has been studied. I think it's high time to compare these ecosystems. And why not? One of the key intertidal people there is Brian Helmuth, a Shoals alum. This isn't him, but it's his slide. And what he does exemplifies what I think will be done more and more, and should probably become routine at Shoals within 50 years as well. Those white straws sticking up are antennae, because nestled among the real mussels are rower mussels, which monitor the environment. Today, sensors are being developed for everything. Batteries are getting smaller and more durable and longer lasting. I think one day our study sites and study organisms will be so well outfitted that we can track and figure out all sorts of details of their lives, perhaps even from afar. Wouldn't it be great to have Gulf of Maine data to compare with Pacific Ocean data? And there are other monitoring programs I see Appledore being a part of. As part of the Ocean Observatories program, PUI is running the Pioneer Array, a series of buoys and underwater monitors. They are focused primarily on Cape Cod and Southwood. What about the Gulf of Maine? I can see a place for the Shoals Marine Lab as those observatories expand. And then there's a role beyond ecology and environmental science. Chuck Walker, retired from Shoals and from UNH, thinks marine life on and off Appledore Island presents a vast, underexplored research for all sorts of biomedical studies. Consider this soft-shell clam, recently discovered to have transmissible cancer and now being developed as a cancer model. I respect and wholeheartedly agree with the vision of exposing students to the natural wonders of marine life in all its dimensions. When I get asked by my sources about my education, I laugh and I say my degree was in biology, pre-molecular biology, and so was the formulation of Shoals' mission. And in the decades since, there's been tension between organismal folks and molecular folks, partly because the new molecular approaches seem to overshadow the more traditional disciplines. But the tide is turning, with molecular types turning to systematists, evolutionary biologists, and the likes, and vice versa. Those boundaries are breaking down on campuses, in curricula, and I hope at Shoals. In 2005, so 12 years ago, at the first International Barcode of Life conference, ecologist Dan Danson posted a Photoshop picture of a flip phone cobbled together with a photo of Sanger sequencing data. And he said, "One day we'll have a DNA sequencer in our pocket." A lot of people laughed. But look at barcoding, which was a new idea then and now is standard in many biological inventories. As for the sequencer in your pocket, it's not that far off either. This is one. If you've never seen this, it's very cool. This black cartridge, well, I guess it's gray now, is filled with the tiny sequencing channels that read DNA as it goes through them. You plug the sequencer into a USB port and let your computer do the rest. I'm oversimplifying, but it's easy enough that several places have undergraduate, even high school sequencing courses making use of this technology. And it's been taken into the field by Ebola researchers in Africa and by Cuba Gardens botanists. They're currently planning to go to Madagascar with it. This is a technology within reach of Appledore. Through sequencing, we are learning all about speciation and adaptation and addressing many classical questions that have troubled biologists for centuries. Gene editing, this other disruptive technology, will make it possible to test hypotheses generated through these genetic studies. A decade ago, only a few lab groups could do targeted gene editing. Now it is becoming more and more routine, and every week journals come out with new applications and new organisms in which CRISPR works. Its use will become pervasive in many aspects of biological research, and the sooner undergraduates get exposed to this technique, the better off they will be. Can that happen at Shoals? Maybe not. But I do believe we need to teach students how to go seamlessly from field to lab, to think not just about how those crabs on wave-exposed rock faces behave differently, but also how their genes are different, and then to test those ideas by knocking out and modifying those genes. I would love to see the lab be part of hybrid courses, where the fieldwork here on Appledore is complemented with lab work on campus. It's all one biology. Some might argue that all these changes might threaten what makes the Shoals experience so special. I hope not. I think it's necessary for the Shoals Marine Lab to continue to morph into a 21st century operation. But as it does, I hope the spirit embodied 50 years ago will be preserved. And I agree with my friend Ian, who said, 50 years from now, I really hope that Appledore will be much as it is now, an oasis of learning lodged in a beautiful and well-protected marine environment. Using its incredible assets, I'd like to see the Shoals Marine Lab help teach the next generations to put down their electronic devices and experience and learn from the amazing natural world that surrounds them. Why play Pokemon Go to find imaginary creatures when any shoreline will provide an even more fascinating real-life creatures? Thank you very much. I've had a lot of help from a lot of people getting pictures and ideas.